Last week, the second episode of GQuuuuuuX dropped, and while I very much enjoyed it, I'm afraid that this might not have been the case for people who are unfamiliar with the Universal Century. They tried cramming an entire series worth of information into a single episode, so I'm sure that it left quite some people confused as to what's going on, who's who, and what's what. So first up, a brief rundown of the story before GQuuuuuuX, which is identical to the story of the very first Gundam. It is the Universal Century 0079, and the Earth Federation controls both the Earth and her space colonies. But in the colony cluster farthest away from Earth, the Zabi family grabs power, declares themselves the Principality of Zeon, and begins their war for independence. Despite being heavily outnumbered, they have something that the Federation doesn't: mobile suits. And with these new machines, they quickly take over most of space, with only a few notable exceptions. The Federation keeps control of the asteroid Luna 2, which is their main military base in space, and now has become their only one. And Site 6 declares themselves neutral, which is also mostly respected by both sides. Also, this is where the GQuuuuuuX anime takes place in UC 0085. So with Zeon dominating in space, their next step was to take over the Earth itself. And while they did have some early successes, the war would eventually settle into a bloody stalemate. A stalemate that then gave the Federation time to work on their own mobile suit program. This program consisted of the long-range gun tank, the long to mid-range gun cannon, and the mid to close-range Gundam, with several units being produced of each. And by the time of both the original anime and the GQuuuuuuX anime, they are being tested out on Site 7, ready to be picked up by an equally brand new warship from which they would be operating. In the original Gundam, this warship and its mobile suits would then go on to play several pivotal roles for the Federation war effort, such as taking out Zeon aces, acting as decoys, and perhaps the most important of all, providing the Federation with valuable real-life mobile suit combat data, which could then be incorporated into their mass production units. This is then where we get to Zeon raiding the colony, and the main difference between the original Gundam and GQuuuuuuX. In the original series, 3 Zeon grunts invade the colony, and the raid fails. But in GQuuuuuuX, one of the grunts can join them because of problems with his Zaku, and instead, Char decides to join the raid. And this guy was no ordinary pilot. Simply put, he was one of Zeon's top aces and was not to be trifled with. So when he saw his chance to steal the Federation's top secret high-tech mobile suit, he did just that. And this Gundam had 2 pieces of technology that Zeon didn't. The first was a new armor material known as Luna Titanium Alloy, which was much stronger than conventional armor materials, but also more difficult to make. And the second was miniaturized beam weaponry. The Federation managed to fit the power of a battleship's megaparticle cannon into a mobile suit-sized weapon. And it was especially this technology that Zeon was all too happy to get their hands on. In fact, the Gundam was so impressive that Char managed to convince the Zeon High Command to stop development of their own next-generation mass production mobile suit, being the Gelgoog, and instead make a mass production version of the Gundam, being the Jim. The Federation, meanwhile, lost out on a lot of valuable combat data that the Gundam would have provided them, and instead of a pure mass-produced Gundam, their mass production version would become a combination of what they assumed were the best qualities of the Gundam and the gun cannon. However, just because the Federation lost the Gundam didn't automatically mean that they lost the war. Around the time of the Gundam's theft, preparations were being made for a major counteroffensive in Europe called Operation Odessa. Odessa was under the control of M'Quve and was a major mining operation that supplied many of the minerals and materials that Zeon desperately needed for the war. so recapturing it would be a major blow to Zeon's resources. And just like in the main timeline, this operation was a great success. Not only would the Federation recapture Odessa, but they also would gain enough momentum to take back most of the Earth. The next step then was taking the fight to space. But before that, let's have a quick look at the leaders of Zeon, because they get mentioned in GQuuuuuX quite a bit, but without any backstory of who they are or why they're important. At the top of Zeon, we have Degwin Sodo Zabi. Officially, he's the one in charge, but in practice, it's his kids who are running the show. And of those kids, it is mainly Giran Zabi. To make his introduction really quick, we could say that he wanted to be a painter at a young age, but sadly got rejected twice by the Art Academy. The second most important sibling then is Cecilia Zabi. She doesn't hold as much power as Giran, but she does have the desire to beat him and also become the ruler of Zeon one day. But since she can't do this out in the open, she's mainly building up her power in secret. And she's also mostly known as being the commander of Zeon's many Spec Ops units. Dozal Zabi then is less politically inclined and mostly just wants to see Zeon win this war as a whole. This is also probably why he doesn't see eye to eye with the more scheming Cecilia. He does absolutely love his little brother Garma though. He is the youngest of the Zeon siblings and is desperate to prove himself on the battlefield. And to complicate things, he especially wants his big sister Cecilia to recognize his skills, so we have quite the web of relationships. In the original series, this need to distinguish himself would get him killed, but in GQuuuuuX, it is instead mentioned that he leaves the military, therefore saving his life. But now we go back to the Federation's counterattack in space, and their first target would be the space fortress Solomon. This base was under the control of the hulking Dozal and was essentially Zeon's first line of defense in space. In the main timeline, Dozal was promised more forces to bolster his defenses, but various issues arose. Not all troops would arrive in time due to political scheming behind the curtains, and the troops that did arrive would not be enough to halt the Federation onslaught. In GQuuuuuX, things would probably have gone very much the same, with one big exception. In an attempt to buy as much time as possible for his retreating troops to escape, Dozal boarded the massive mobile armor Big Zam. And with it, he launched a full frontal assault on the Federation troops, who then had to focus all of their attention on him. In the main timeline, this diversion was extremely effective until it was stopped by the Gundam. But because the Federation no longer had the Gundam in GQuuuuuX, the Federation probably took much more losses before Dozal and his Big Zam could be stopped there. But stopped he was, and Solomon fell to the Federation, giving them an excellent base of operations for their future attacks on Zeon-controlled space. Shortly after this battle then, we are introduced to Shalia Bull, also known as the Man from Jupiter, because he was the commander of the Jupiter Energy Fleet. This was an organization that collected hydrogen, methane, and helium-3 on Jupiter, and then transported it back to the Earth sphere on massive Jupiter's-class spaceships. Because helium-3 was so rare on Earth, and also an essential fuel source for spaceships and other things in the Gundam universe, this fleet was granted special protections by both Zeon and the Federation. And when Shalia returned to Zeon with all of his precious gases, something else about him also caught their attention. He was believed to be a new type, a special kind of human that is believed to be the next step in our evolution. Just don't go looking for what a concrete explanation of what a new type is. Even in universe, people are divided on what they are, and this is even alluded to in GQuuuuuX. Shalia is stuck in between Cecilia and Giran, who have different ideas on a lot of things. including on what a new type is supposed to be and on what they are supposed to be used for. And at the same time, we're also introduced to Dr. Flanagan, who is the head researcher of something known as the Flanagan Institute. This is a special institute that was established by Zeon to investigate new types and also the ways in which they could be used. And the most important use case for the military, and also for the story, was the Psychomu system. This system taps into the special brainwaves that new types apparently have, and allows them to control mobile suits with their mind, giving them much faster response times than normal humans. And it also allows them to control remote weaponry, like funnels and bits. These are the UC equivalent of Dragoons from Seed and Fangs from 00. But there is one bonus feature that these UC remote weapons have. The Universal Sentry has something that is called the Minovsky particle. It is used for a lot of things, but the most important practical use here is that it jams communications, radar waves, and other such things, meaning that guided missiles and a lot are absolutely useless. However, they don't jam the brainwaves that new types emit to control those guided weapons. So these new types were a very valuable asset for the military. But back to Char and Shalia's meeting. In the original series, Char had already teamed up with another new type, and therefore his meeting with Shalia was much more touch and go, after which Shalia was killed in action. In GQuuuuuX, however, the butterfly effect caused Char to not have met up with that other new type, and he instead strikes up a friendship with Shalia at the Flanagan Institute. Here, the captured Gundam is also being outfitted with the Psychomu system and the aforementioned remote weaponry that can be used with that system, which Char then subsequently tested out in a guerrilla attack against the Federation forces occupying Solomon. And this attack would prove to be incredibly effective, both for the big physical hit that it dealt to the Federation and the big psychological hit. Because of the Minovsky particles and their jamming properties, the Federation wasn't expecting a precise, guided, long-range attack because it was simply made impossible. This new Psychomu system, however, offered exactly that. And because the attacking force consisted only of Char and Shalia, they were also incredibly difficult to detect as well. So for the Federation, it was as if they were being attacked by a ghost. When all was said and done, the GQuuuuuX Federation was a lot weaker than the original Federation. But their big push had to go on. So after their victory at Solomon, they had two choices. Just like in the original, they could go for the space fortress Abawaku. Like Solomon, this was a major Zeon stronghold and served somewhat as a last line of defense for Zeon. Once breached, the path would be open into the Zeon homeland. And also, Abawaku was commanded directly by Giran himself, making it an even more enticing target, but of course also a very well defended target. The other major Zeon base then was their lunar base at Granada, commanded by Cassilia Zabi. But before the Federation had the option to choose, M'Quve decided that the best defense is the offense and used a large portion of Zeon's remaining fleet to go and conquer Luna 2. This didn't happen in the original series, but I can make an educated guess about the reasoning behind this. As mentioned before, M'Quve was defeated at Odessa, and on top of that, he was a very prideful man, so I have no doubt that he was absolutely chomping at the bit to regain his glory. Seeing the Federation in the state that they were in, he probably figured that this was it and launched his attack. And while he did succeed, it did leave Granada wide open for an attack by the Federation, which they did by attempting to drop Solomon onto the moon. And this might be another major source of confusion for people who haven't seen Char's counterattack, because the entire Solomon drop is stopped by Char doing this thing called the Zek Nova. In short, it's magic. Slightly less short though, if a new type pushes too much of their new type powers into the Psychoma system, for example by trying to push away a giant asteroid with a single mobile suit, the Psychoma system can be overloaded, resulting in unexpected results like being able to push away said asteroid. So it's magic. The problem with this magic trick though is that when such an overload happens, the pilot is spirited away and we don't know what happens to them. Are they dead? Are they alive in some other form? Or are they something else entirely? But whatever the case might be, this is part of the plot of GQuuuuuuX. Char got spirited away by the Psychoma system overloading, and Shalia wants to find out what happened to his friend. And that is the short version of the backstory for GQuuuuuuX, so I hope that at least for some people, this will make it easier to enjoy this series, because so far, I'm very much enjoying it. As always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.